God,
grant me the serenity
to accept the things I cannot change,
the courage to change the things I can,
and the wisdom to know the difference.
In this edition of Overcoming Addiction, we will focus on support services for family members and loved ones. Tonight's guests are Kathy Day from Learn to Cope, Doreen Clark, and Dennis Murray. Together, we can make a difference. Here's your host, Paul Hammersley. Hi, I'm Paul Hammersley. Welcome to another edition of Overcoming Addiction, and I'm also the president of Malden Overcoming Addiction. And tonight we're going to talk about support services for family members and loved ones. Very important topic right now in the world of addiction, and we have a group here called Learn to Cope. I'm going to go right into the show. I'm going to go right into the first question, Kathy, and I'm going to ask you, can you tell me what kind of support and resources that people can expect to get? Like, what happens at a Learn to Cope meeting? What do they do when you see the word Learn to Cope? What does it mean?
Sure. So Learn to Cope is support specifically for family members and loved ones who have somebody struggling with the disease of addiction. We're peer-led. It's a warm, wonderful space for people to come into to get education, resources, support, and most importantly, hope. Because family members suffer from their loved ones' addiction, and oftentimes when we get educated and we start to learn and get support, when we get well, sometimes it helps our loved ones get well as well. Yeah,
and right now, we take a lot of calls at Malden Overcoming Addiction. We place a lot of folks into detox and aftercare as well. We have a scholarship program. I end up taking all the submissions on the website, and 9 times out of 10, and it's been really busy the past month or so. Yeah. I'm talking to family members and they're a wreck, and they need help. And so, I've been pushing them towards Learn to Cope, and everyone might not be as apt to make that call, especially when you're a family member and you do not have the disease of addiction. You're going through it with your loved one. You don't think you need help. But meanwhile, you could be, there's enabling, there's all of these things going on, and that's why I can't emphasize enough the good work that Learn to Cope does. So, where is the closest Learn to Cope meeting to Malden?
Okay, so our closest Learn to Cope chapter is in Cambridge. We meet on Monday nights from 7 to 8:30 at Spalding Rehab Hospital, which is 1575 Cambridge Street, and we're in the 3rd floor chapel.
So that's the closest to Malden. So if someone was to go, let's just say someone went to a Learn to Cope meeting, what would their experience be like? Do they sit in a room? Is it sort of like maybe an AA meeting or an NA meeting? Is there a speaker? Because I'm sure that family members might be nervous when they show up. They don't know what to expect. Can they bring a family member with them? Sure. Or, there's so many questions I have.
Yeah. And people have questions, so I always encourage them to reach out to the Learn to Cope office or to myself too, because we want to make that easier for people to attend, because we recognize it's hard, right, to walk through the door because you don't know what to expect. You don't know whether you're going to see someone that you know. I remember when I first started going to meetings, I literally was like, I don't know why I'm going to meetings. It's their problem, not mine. And then I went there and I was like, oh. Like, now I know why I'm going to meetings, right? Because I needed to get better, too.
And you can be around other folks that are going through the same thing you're going through, and then you build support with other family members as well. Other families, not your own. So you start to get your own network of help.
And
go ahead.
So all of our meetings are different. So, for example, the Cambridge meeting is generally about 20 people. Folks sit in a circle. We do crosstalk, which generally doesn't happen at 12-step meetings. But I can raise my hand and say, hey, I'm Kathy, this is what's going on with me right now. And someone else can respond to me and say, well, this is what my family has been through and this is what helped us. And so we share a lot of experience. So we learn from each other. We never tell each other what to do per se, but we will share what has or has not worked in our own lives. And then we also have speakers that come in that educate us about important topics like medicated assisted treatment or Section 35 or healthy boundaries, so those tend to be the professionals in the field. And then we also have amazing folks in long-term recovery that come in and share their stories of hope with us. That, that's where we
So the
keep going.
families can actually hear a story of hope from someone who's went through what they've just watched their loved one going through when they think there's no hope.
Exactly.
So a couple of things you mentioned, and then I'm going to talk to Doreen, but you mentioned a Section 35, so I do want to talk about that. So this week, a woman called me, and she did a Section 35 on her son. So if no one knows what that means, I want to talk about that. So a Section 35 is sort of if your loved one is living with you and is refusing to get help, but you know they need it, you could actually go to the court because they could be a danger to themselves, and you could actually file something, and that person could be taken from your home and put into a facility, into a treatment facility for X amount of time. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we do have that law in Massachusetts. It's sort of a last resort for families if they can't, find any other way to get their loved one to get the help that they need. So a Section 35 enables families to go in front of the court and petition to have them civilly committed for a period of time where they're away from the drugs that they're taking, where they are safe, and where it kind of gives them a chance to let their head clear a little bit. They're not using, and if they choose to access services beyond that, there is case management that can happen. It's not a perfect system, right? But it's designed to be a last resort to be able to help families.
And one of the obstacles a lot of times is getting the person to the help they need because they're so stuck in that spot. And at least a section, if you put someone there for X amount of time, the fog can start to clear, and then they might want some help. I don't want to say it's a great choice, but it is an option for a family that is struggling, just to know that that option is there. And there's something I want to mention to you, because I know in your meetings some people get confused because there's learn to cope. When you go there, you're helping out family members of people in their family who are actively using, and then there are meetings out there where people pass and then people can go grieve. There's grieving meetings as well. So from what I understand, that Learn to Cope now is starting to pick up some grieving meetings. It's on a different, could you just explain that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because I know some people get confused, and we want to make it perfectly clear exactly between the two.
Sure. So I love that you asked that. And so Learn to Cope meetings provide support to family members and loved ones who have someone struggling with addiction. So someone that is with us, that's living, that is, in whatever journey that they're in. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, with the scope of this epidemic, we have many Learn to Cope families, unfortunately, that have lost loved ones. So as part of being able to help folks that have lost their loved ones, we kind of took under our wing or our umbrella some independent grief groups that have popped up that family members have started, and we help to support and advertise those. So they're not, it's weird to say, they're not necessarily Learn to Cope meetings, although they're under our umbrella. We call them Coping Today meetings.
Okay.
They all have their own individual names, and Doreen.
But it's resources.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
So, right, Learn to Cope members have a family within Learn to Cope, and God forbid they lose their loved one. It's that same sort of peer model where somebody can go to a meeting where they've lost a loved one, and there's someone there that's going to understand what they are going through better than anyone else that has never gone through it. And so it really gives people a chance to grieve and heal in a way that they may not be able to do in a regular Learn to Cope meeting, because those folks are still dealing with their loved ones.
And if someone called you or called the number or went to the website and they asked these questions, you're offering both, but they're different.
Yes.
There's grieving groups and there's actual Learn to Cope meetings for families that are just trying to understand of the people who are living.
Yes.
Okay, so, and now that's where Doreen comes in. So Doreen, you're part of the grieving group process. Could you, Doreen, tell me, what brought you there?
I lost my son June 13th, 2014. For about 6 months, I was in a fog. Everybody knows, how you feel when you lose your child. Mm-hmm. So then somebody had recommended to me to go to one of these grief groups. And actually, I was going to a grief group and seeing a therapist. I ended up dropping the therapist and staying with the grief group. Because when you go into a grief group of peers, somebody who has lost a child or a husband or a wife, there is a very common understanding in the meeting. There is no judgment, there are no questions. You feel very comfortable because you know that person sitting across from you has been through the same thing. This is where I felt most comfortable, was with this grief group. It just helped me to get through the really hard times that I was having, different levels of grief. You know, you've got your first year, you've got your second year, and everybody's in a different level at that time. So it's a very good feeling, a comforting feeling, because people help you to deal with certain things, a loved one's birthday, Christmas, their passing date, you know. We try to help each other get through all
So
that.
again, you're around, everyone in that room is going through the same thing.
Correct.
And it's unbearable, I get it, but at least you can be around other folks that are going through it, and you sort of lean on each other for support.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're all going through the same feelings. We're all going through the same emotions. We're all going through. We share laughter with each other. We share our tears with each other. We don't judge anybody. We just listen, try and offer any advice that we feel that would help them, or how we dealt with something.
Right. And so it's all around. It's an amazing place. There is help.
There is help.
There is
Oh,
something.
definitely,
There is
yes.
some help out there. So my next question will be, Doreen, where would these meetings? Where is a grieving? Like if we wanted to put it out there on air, where can people go closest to Malden? When does the grieving group meet?
Okay. My group is Our Angels Wings. We meet the third Thursday every month at the Meg Building in Saugus on Essex Street from 6:30 to 8.
Want to say that one more time?
Okay. The Meg Building.
Meg Building. Okay.
MEG Building.
Yep.
On Essex Street in Saugus.
Okay.
It's right off of the square.
That's the third.
Third Thursday of the month, 6:30 to 8.
And can I just add, so if anyone wanted to find out where the other grief groups were too, they could go to learn2cope.org and click on grief resources, and we list the meetings there.
Awesome. So we're right now. So there is. I just wanted to make sure there's there's a difference between both.
Yep.
And there's just, this is amazing that people, some people just don't know what is out there. So you can get help on both spectrums. So now we have with us tonight Dennis. Now, Dennis, you've went to Learn to Cope. Is that correct? Is that what I understand? So, Dennis, can you just tell me maybe what led you? Why did you contact, or how did you contact, or what led you to go to Learn to Cope? Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, so my son was in active addiction, and when you're raising someone and you don't know what to do when you come across this problem, you don't know, we just didn't know what to do, and so for years we just kind of like dealt with it, hid it, and you're ashamed, you're embarrassed, and it just. I had people telling me, you go to this organization, that organization, and he'd be in a detox and then treatment, and then a friend of mine from Salem recommended going to this meeting, Learn to Cope. So when I went into the meeting the first time, I didn't know what to expect.
So let me ask you, so your friend mentions this meeting to you.
Correct.
You actually find out where it is.
Yeah.
You open the door, you walk in. What were you feeling?
Very nervous.
Okay, and then, but what was it like once you get in?
Very comforting, because I looked around the room and there was, probably 40 or 50 people that kind of, some looked like I did, some looked relaxed, and I happen to know like 3 or 4 people in there, and it made me very comfortable.
So it's almost like, wow, you too.
Yeah, yeah.
You're struggling too, and you're getting through it.
Exactly, because I always thought, no one's going through what I'm going through. People, their kids are doing this or doing that.
You
But
felt alone.
they don't know what I'm going through. And, I've been going there for 3 years now. And so for 3 years before that, I kind of just suffered for me and my wife and just kept it inside. Didn't tell anybody. And it wasn't until I started going to meetings and opening up, and it felt like I got like an elephant off my back.
So let me ask you, to that point, what kind of changes have you seen in yourself You said you've been going for 3 years?
3 years.
So where you were at 3 years ago to where you are today,
Yeah.
do you notice any changes?
Oh, I'm just a totally different person now, you know. And it's funny because I didn't talk for probably the first, I don't know, 7, 8 meetings, but I wanted to go, and I look forward every week to go to that meeting. And I was afraid to open up, and then finally when I opened up and told everybody, you know, I felt relieved a little bit, you know. I felt a little pressure off me. And then as time goes on, and you know, your son puts in a little you know, clean time, and then you have a relapse. So I was learning to not be so high, because I had put 6 months together, and I'd be like, oh, this is great, 6 months, and I was worrying about, you know, sober dates and stuff like that, and then there would be a relapse, and I'd go back down, and so I learned to keep kind of on a.
You were kind of living through him.
Yeah, and then, you know, you could see, you talk to people in there, and as a matter of fact, Kathy told me one time, it's like, when things were going well, you could see the look on my face that things, she goes, you look like things are going well, and I'd say, yeah, things are going well right now, and you just learn to help yourself, because you're suffering so long, because you think you're doing something wrong, or, you know, you're punishing yourself.
Because you think it's your fault.
Because you think, yeah, you
You're
think
taking it all. Where
and
did
you
I
know,
go
yeah,
wrong?
And why can't I fix this? You know, and we can. You know, and through going to the meetings, I learned. You know, I got to educate myself, and through education, you know, you learn what to do and what not to do, and you know, you just become healthy again.
So let me ask you this question. What makes you want to talk about your family experience? Like, where does that come from? Because a lot of people, they don't want to talk. They don't want to talk about, like, they go, they just, you keep it under.
Exactly, that was me.
And so what makes you now want to talk about
Well,
that?
now that, you know, I'm not, because this, like, you know, you've talked before about stigma, and that's the stigma that's on the addict, or the family of the addict, and you're ashamed, you're embarrassed and stuff. But once I got out and started talking to people and seeing other people come in, I learned that I didn't do anything wrong, and I'm just trying to help. And the look I had on my face walking through the door, now 3 years later, I see those people coming in, and they look like I did 3 years ago, and I just want to kind of help them and open up and say, listen, you know, I was you 4 years ago.
So
5
you
years
can
ago.
help someone else now and just kind of make them at ease.
Exactly, and just and then just tell them what you went through and share your experience, and at the end of it all, there's the hope, and that's all we have is hope, and that's what I learned at the meetings, that you can never give up hope. Is, you know, as many times they relapse and go, you know, you can't give up. You know, there's always hope.
So where are you at today with your family member?
My son is coming up 15 months sober.
Wow.
Just a totally different individual. He learned, you know, he had been through treatment, and they were probably great treatment centers, but he wasn't ready to get clean, and he just wouldn't, you know, he would go through the program, learn a little bit, and then, you know, follow through, and then just kind of tail off. But then he went through this program, I think, realizing that he was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and embraced what they taught him through the 12 steps, through the big book, and that's his life now, and
That's amazing, Dennis.
He's a great. It's amazing to see the difference that, you know. I would get a phone call from him, and my heart would just jump, and now I get a phone call, and I'm looking forward to the phone call because it's a good phone call.
So
I don't worry.
Let me ask you this. So with everything that you've just said, how is your relationship with your son, even though he's clean? Do you think your relationship is better now because you've went to learn to cope and educated yourself on the disease? So now the relationship is even that much better than where he got clean.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have better, your relationship.
Absolutely.
Would it be,
Because-
yeah.
And with them knowing that I'm educating myself through the meetings, they know that you know
Right.
what's going on now. You know, when you didn't know earlier, and in their addiction. You didn't know. But now I'm educating myself, and I know. And so when you tell me this, no, that's not working no more. That worked before, but now I know a little bit. And addicts have told us, that have spoke at our meetings, that Learn to Cope has actually helped them because their parents got educated.
That's amazing, and I thank you for coming on here and sharing your family experience. And Dennis, it's I've known you.
Yeah.
You grew up here in Malden, and the disease of addiction doesn't discriminate.
No.
That's one thing about the disease. It doesn't nothing matters.
No.
All bets are off. So to see you sitting here, I commend you for that. And Kathy, I do want to ask a couple more questions with Learn to Cope. And why aren't there Learn to Cope meetings in every community?
So that's a great question. We currently have 25 in Massachusetts, which is a lot. We were started in 2004, so we've had to add a lot of groups because of the scope of the epidemic. And when people say, hey, I want a meeting here or here, what I try to get them to understand is, one, we don't always have the capacity, but two, if there were meetings everywhere, you would lose the ability to connect with people from other communities and hear from their experiences. You would lose that ability to go somewhere that maybe you could feel a little more anonymous. People say sometimes they want a meeting in their own community, and then you hear from the same folks, oh, I don't know that I would go because I'd run into people that I know. So I think the fact that we don't have meetings in every community is not a bad thing, because it allows there to be a real variety, diversity of experience. When you walk into a room of 3 people, it would still, there's nothing wrong with 3 people, but you could still feel like, wow, it's just me and these 3 people that are going through this. But you walk into a room of 15 or 20 or sometimes 60 people, and you get that feeling, you look around, you go, okay, I'm really not alone in this.
So is it a question of demand? Because, you can look at that from a whole different scope. You can look at it as the people that are in Woburn might want to come to Malden to get out of Woburn.
Right.
So you could actually go 2 different ways. Or like if the demand got much higher, do you think that they could create more Learn to Cope meetings?
Maybe
Possibly?
Maybe eventually, yes.
Okay.
But I think people don't always take into account too, like our meetings are really run by the volunteers.
Right.
So we provide the support, but it's the volunteers that are there every week, welcoming folks, making sure stuff gets done, and that the meetings go the way that they should. So it's a tremendous commitment from the families, and Dorian, I know she can speak to this too.
Yep.
You make a commitment to do it, and it's important to follow through, and it's important to follow through in a way that people are supported. So it is kind of a commitment for folks. And sometimes people would rather just go to a meeting and just be a parent or a sibling or a spouse versus a facilitator or a volunteer.
And seeing as how you just said parent, sibling, or spouse, that's one of my next questions, and I want to know, so is it just for parents, or like, is everyone welcome? Can anyone go, whether it's a sibling, a spouse, if it's a brother? Or maybe somebody's brother's using, or a teenager, and can anyone come?
Sure. So we started out as sort of a parent group, but it's much more than that. So it's parents, it's siblings, it's spouses, as far as like a child. So because we are funded by the Department of Public Health, people have to be 18 or older to attend, because they need to be able to process the hard conversations that happen there.
So if there's an 18, 19, 20-year-old and their brother or sister is unfortunately stuck using,
So that would be a place for them.
that's
Sure.
a place for them to come and just try to figure it out,
Yeah.
try to understand.
Yeah, younger kids, I say no, just because we do talk about some really hard stuff, and that would be difficult maybe for some of them to understand.
I get it. No, that makes total sense. But so the bottom line is, it's not just parents.
Right.
If there's someone in your family that's stuck.
Siblings, we get a lot of siblings
A lot of
that need
friends.
support.
And so is there a website? Is there a phone number? Do you have anything you want to plug?
Sure. So I haven't mentioned that we also provide free Narcan training through the Department of Public Health. So anyone that attends a Learn to Cope meeting can walk away with overdose prevention information and naloxone or Narcan. So I think that's important.
Just
to
by
say.
going to a Learn to Cope meeting, you can leave with Narcan.
Yep. So if you're a family member or loved
Wow.
one and have someone struggling, we do offer that.
That's amazing.
So I would want to say that, and then I'd also just want to say you can check our website, which is learn2cope.org. for more information.
Learn the number 2.cope.org.
Learn2cope.org.
.org, okay.
And then just sometimes people ask us if they can bring their loved one who's struggling. And I just let them know that that's really just a safe place for them, the family members, siblings, spouses, that we encourage folks who are struggling to go to their own meetings, but it really needs to remain sort of a safe space for the family members to express what's going on. And sometimes when their loved ones attend, it changes the dynamic.
Okay.
And they really need to have this safe space
So
for
we're
them.
keeping it right at the family level.
Yep.
And is there anything we missed? Does anybody have anything they want to add? We have about another minute or so. Is there something we missed?
I just want to say, too, the next thing that's coming up that we're finding is people that have left behind children and grandparents that are raising the children now, or somebody else is raising that child.
Yes.
We've noticed a lot of that happening now. And they're starting support groups for, people who are 60, 65 years old starting over with a year-old child. So they are starting to recognize that. And we're hoping that they're going to get the groups going and get it strong so that these people also have support too.
And where would someone go for that information, or are we hoping that that's what's coming?
We're hoping that's what's coming.
Because
People
you're
are
right,
working
there are
on it.
the number of grandparents that are raising
Grandchildren.
it's alarming. It's at an alarming rate right now. So that's another resource. Hopefully,
We're working on it right now. There are a few people working on
We
that.
have
we have
a lot of
some-
grandparents at our meetings. Like she's saying, but we have a lot of them coming to our meetings.
well, this meeting, this show has been very informative, and I cannot thank you guys enough for coming on. Hopefully, I don't see this going away anytime soon, and it's going to be groups like Learn to Cope that can offer support for family members, loved ones, and to try to, just the bottom line, just to help the community that you live in. And if you are struggling, we want you to connect with Malden Overcoming Addiction via our Facebook page at Malden Overcoming Addiction. You can get us on Twitter at Malden Overcomes. Our website is MaldenOvercomingAddiction.com. And please, if you are struggling or you know someone, if there's a family member that you think needs help, you just don't know what to do, please contact Learn to Cope. Tune in next month. We'll be here in about a month, and we thank you guys for watching. Thank you so much.